It's lovely to be here, and Jim, thank you for your welcome. It's nice to come to be in St. Paul's today. A very special reading from Abraham this morning is very important for us because it reminds us clearly about our obedience and our calling. When Abraham was called, therefore, by God to go and leave the land leave the land of Haran and go to Canaan, it was a great risk for him. But in following in obedience, he went and left where he was being comfortable in a sense, his homeland, the place he knew, and took his family over to the land of Canaan, to Shechem, where actually God called him to be. And when he arrived there, it was clear that God saw an obedience in Abraham that he really required. And as such, he said to him, I will now give you, to you and your offspring, this land. And therefore Abraham then built an altar on that place to remind them of himself that God had called him into that particular place. Now, callings come to us all in our different lives and different ways. Some clergy will reflect, of course, that they feel calling does often take them a long way. I can remember leaving Somerset. We went to Newcastle, and I'd visited twice before we went to the parish. Both times I flew up and was met at the airport in Newcastle, driven to where I was supposed to go, and taken back. And the same. So on the day when we actually arrived there, we knew nothing, except I said to Sue, well, if we can find the church, I can find the house. Because I remember that bit. Quite useful, that, really. And we arrived at the Tyne Tunnel, and we said to this gentleman, day before sat-nav that was, well, where's Long Benton? He said, oh, well, and I thought, oh, my goodness, this could be interesting. We drove past an Asda. Now, that's good news, isn't it? If you're driving past the supermarket, that's really good news. And from the supermarket, we found our own home. So for the first few weeks, we oscillated from home to the supermarket, which we knew, and then we found the wonders of the Screwfix, which happened to be next year to the Tip. Well, those three things were all we needed. For weeks and weeks and weeks, it did seem, until we learned the place where we were there and where we were called to be and the people with whom we were privileged to go and serve. All of our callings happen in different ways and take us in different directions. But it does also remind me very clearly about the moment when I was talked into, felt I had to, abseil down a tower. Now, I don't know how many of you, I know Jim does, he's good at these sort of things, but I don't know how many of you have ever done any abseiling. Well, those of you who have, I'm an expert, I don't think. I was looking after a group of children when I was on a school trip. And they said, Father Martin, you've got to go abseil. I'm thinking, no, I haven't. Oh, yes, you have. Oh, no, I haven't. Yes, you have. So up to the top I went. Now, I don't know if you've ever done it. Well, you're strapped up by the instructor. I suppose that was the easy bit. The easy bit's coming down. The worst bit is standing with your back into the abyss and putting your bottom out and thinking, oh, my goodness, what's going to happen next as I fall to the ground? And you trust that the instructor has done all the right things, which thankfully I had in my case, and that when you actually do go out, all these ropes and straps they put onto you hold you beautifully. And you're there suspended in air, it seems, until they then give you the next instruction of how to get down the side of this tower. Oh yeah. I can tell you when I got to the bottom, I was very, very relieved. But I've never forgotten the experience, because actually stepping out like that is like the step of faith, which all of us are called to make. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but making that step of faith is what we're called to do. And frequently it's not easy. And all of us have got different examples in our lives when we've gone to places and thought, my goodness, what are we doing here? If you look to the world in which we live, at this moment, there's so many complexities, aren't there? If you look to Gaza or Ukraine, so many places which calls us to be really concerned, to pray for those who are suffering, to pray for those who are dislodged from what was at one point their home, their place of being. If you look at the pictures of Gaza now, it takes us back to the pictures we saw of Dresden at the end of the Second World War. The two look identical, of places completely annihilated. And we've seen the pictures of people holding And the ones that also cause me difficulty, you see mums and dads holding a small white bag where their little one is held. And it really brings us home to us all the time of the plight of so many people in our world. I believe we are called very clearly to actually stand as Christians, to be the people that witness to a God of love, who calls us not to fight and to actually want to take over, but to love, to be reconciled in the world. It seems so long, but if you go back on history, what are wars based on? Well, there are numerous factors, aren't they, started. But at the moment we see one wanting to take over all of Gaza, or one taking over this bit of Ukraine. And the fights go on because of people wanting to take over what they think belongs to them. Following a calling is never easy. Abraham left and went with his family, took them with him, but would have left behind what he knew. But his obedience to God was such that that was the right thing to do. That's what God called him to do. And when he arrived there, so he was honored in that way. When God said, I will give you this land and your offspring for your obedience. Each and every one of us are called to serve. And some people say, oh, well, that's something that happens to young people. Well, actually, I want to say to you that it isn't. Let me tell you about Nesta. Nesta was an 88-year-old lady in my curacy parish who lived very close to the church, wasn't physically very fit and able, but she was a devoted and loving servant of God. And her sincerity was really clear. And one of her great gifts was her prayer ministry. My incumbent used to say to me, if something's going wrong, Martin, I call Nesta. And I'll go out and go whatever it is. But I know that Nesta's praying for me and the people I'm going to see, or the situation I'm going to go into. Nesta, I'm sure now, has died. But her ministry and the way she served God in that place, in my curacy place, will never leave me. I'll always remember her. And it really reminded me then and reminds me now that each of us are called in different ways to serve God, whatever way that might be. And that is, for each of us, a privilege. And so if we take something from today's reading, it is about that obedience to go, wherever that might be, to do what we're called to do, and whatever age we are. Every part that we place in being a part of our Christian community, everything that we do is what God calls us to do, then it is the right thing, however big or small that might be, as we seek to serve him here in this place. Amen.